All right. So thank you everyone for joining our webinar on attack surface management um, among COVID times. We will do some quick introductions on this slide and then we will get started. So Chris, do you want to kick us off?
Certainly. So my name is Chris Kubecka, and I am the founder and owner of HypaSec, which is a company that does advisement to various governments, United Nations, and handles nation-state attacks and cyber warfare. And I'm also the distinguished chair for the Middle Eastern Institute's cyber program.
And then we have a variety of folks here from Census. So I'll kick us off. My name is Morgan Princing. I'm a senior solutions engineer here. Prior to joining Census, I worked in the world of bot detection and mitigation. So I'm very happy to be involved, and I can pass it on to Yasmin.
Hi, I'm Yasmin. I'm a software engineer at Census, and I work primarily on our attack surface monitoring tool, which we'll talk more about later.
And hello, my name is Alexis Culp. I'm a principal solutions engineer here at Census. I'm part-time program manager at Census and part-time solutions engineer. My history and my passion is in STEM, and I'm also a member of Women in Cybersecurity, known as WESIS. Very passionate about filling the gap and the need of cybersecurity expertise, especially among more diverse organizations.
All right, so we're here to talk with you kind of about attack surface management. We've got Chris as well. But just as a quick background, if you're not familiar, we put this roundtable together as a panel of women to kind of talk about attack surface management and visibility from a global perspective of what is happening with different attack surfaces among COVID. So, at Census, we are an attack surface management company. We're helping to bring visibility around externally exposed assets. We scan more than 2,000 ports on every IPv4 host on the internet and gather information like TLS certificates, domain names that we find, and then aggregate all of that into particular assets that would be owned by an organization. We enrich that information with other data sources and distill this kind of big data into visualizations, a stream of changes, and APIs that customers can use to basically understand their external exposures. So Chris has been using our global internet data for years. As we're scanning those 2,000 plus ports on every IPv4 host, we also make the global internet data set available. And so she's been using that, and in fact, she's written a couple of books about using open source OSINT tools and sources, including Census. So Chris, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about some of your books or some of the history you've had using Census in the past.
Definitely. One of the things that brought me to Census was ease of use, because I've used a lot of OSINT sources, and I still do, and I enjoy the number of ports that I can scan. And that led me down to trying to teach other people how to use various OSINT tools, including Census, and two of my books. Down the Rabbit Hole, an OSINT Journey covers a multitude of tools to get to those particular goals. And Hack the World with OSINT is actually a book on how to use Census to look at everything from email issues, encryption issues, web application issues, and so forth, and how you can get in depth and also use the API, which is extremely rich and well documented with Census versus all of the rest of the tools that I generally use.
Awesome. So, we are excited to be here. We thought we would probably have a fun time sharing some findings together and have this roundtable discussion. All right, so let's dig in. Chris, do you want to start with kind of how COVID has changed the threat landscape from your perspective?
Absolutely. So COVID has accelerated remote work, as we all know. And with remote work, that also involves things like technicians and engineers who might not be able to go into critical infrastructure like your power plant or the IT department to go into a hospital to handle IT issues or medical device issues. And so suddenly we've gone from can we really work from home to we have to work from home. And it also shifted these priorities that security teams have to deal with. So we're already used to dealing with the everyday things, trying to connect people, keep them connected safely, and make sure that business can go on. But now we have this challenge of doing it from what I call bring your own house, BYOH,
Right.
where employees now have to struggle with the fact, as do security teams, that you're now sharing your network with your family. You can't just segment your network off or tell your family, hey, guess what, kids? I know you're stuck at home, but you can't go to YouTube. And not a lot of employers have the wherewithal to understand that they should be able to equip their employees with things like switches and managed switches for security teams to be able to now protect those home networks, because our traditional perimeter used to be the office, which had a lot of different both physical and digital security things that could protect employees, intellectual property, sensitive equipment. Now, the perimeter is as strong as your door lock. And we've also seen a lot of very interesting phishing opportunities. One of the problems with things like cybercrime is wherever they can go to get the money, they're going to go. So whether that is sending false emails about vaccines, false emails about, hey, we're so and so from the office, you can't come in or you can come in, or discussing employee matters which don't really come from that company. These things have become more and more prevalent, especially since many organizations still lack simple email encryption or DMARC. So a lot of email domains are very easy to spoof. So where the money is where the criminals are going to go. And many times, the criminals, cyber criminals, are not they're not as sophisticated usually as a nation state. They're going to go for that low-hanging fruit, and still, a lot of organizations don't proactively look at their exposure on the internet. And Census is one of those tools that can help with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just plug in too. We're trying to make sure we're giving recommendations, and when talking about the home networks and BYOH, we do want to offer that if you go to me.census.io, which we can include kind of in follow-ups of this webinar, but you can actually take a look at what your home IP posture is. So we recommend that's a free tool that you can send to colleagues, you can send to parents, or other folks, just to say, hey, what do you have exposed on your home network? And if you're an organization that's looking to do that at scale, we can certainly help you out as well to give a perspective of where there might be shortcomings, kind of given this new distributed workforce that we are all finding ourselves in. Okay, so I'll also add on here that we have a little bit of data, and what we have been doing at Census is we have been tracking just a handful of healthcare organizations since the onset of COVID. So this is a fairly small sample size. It's about 10 organizations spanning a variety of industries within the healthcare umbrella. But we have been tracking them since January and just kind of keeping tabs on what has happened with their attack surface. So one other caveat I'll make is that we did abbreviate this at September. October of this year, we released a new scan engine, which had some improved detection mechanisms. So we wanted to make sure that we were comparing apples to apples. Therefore, we cut off in September here. But what we're showing is just kind of an aggregate change of services month over month. And the real takeaway from this is that if we look at services like SMB, VNC, Telnet, and RDP, all things that can pose risks for different organizations. They can be entry points for ransomware distributing, infections and viruses. If we look at these types of services, we've just been seeing a constant fluctuation. And it doesn't seem like we are noticing that, the trend certainly isn't that companies are saying, hey, we've got this under control and we've kind of reached a steady state. Instead, from our perspective, what we're really seeing is that while some of these services might get closed, early in March, maybe we had, a surge of folks aggregately shutting down more of these services. When we come back to April or May, we see a lot of them being spun up again. So this kind of open and close pattern is something that we're really noticing, and it is leading us to believe that, while attack surface management is challenging all of the time, right now it's really even more challenging to just kind of get a grip on these changes and drifts that are happening among COVID.
So on this slide, one of the challenges that
sorry about that.
pharmaceutical companies have, they're like any other production company when it comes to trying to ensure that, for example, let's say your Siemens or your Honeywell or what have you, pharmaceutical companies and other production companies, they have to maintain remote access so that technicians from, say, Siemens, Honeywell, can constantly monitor the environment to make sure that they aren't operating out of ranges and so forth. And what happens is there's quite a bit of, say, remoteness, whether it is secure or insecure. And what I did was do a scan on two of the more major pharmaceutical companies in the world. I won't name them. And some of the things that I found within about, I don't know, 30 minutes were some of these very common, known to be exploitable vulnerabilities. So you want to connect remotely and securely, you use some SSH. But the problem is, if you're not using the right version, there are various remote attacks, some quite high, that you have to be concerned with. So if you're not updating your SSH version, then you could be at risk for modification and so forth. And that's the last thing you want when you're a pharma industry. There's also various operating system issues that are abound because there's a lot of Linux use. There's also a lot of Windows use. And I found several instances of remote access being available, including remote desktop protocol. There's also a good deal of development and staging servers that are out there that belong to these pharmaceutical companies that have expired certificates. And I will add, you should not expose staging and development servers to the internet because it can give an attacker an advantage to know what's about to come if they want to stay inside your network. This is one of the things that occurred when I was able to legally and ethically look at Boeing's infrastructure and getting into their research and development infrastructure. This kind of stuff is very high value. Right now, we're looking at the fact that whatever country or trading bloc gets their population inoculated will give them an economic advantage over the other ones. And then there's also encryption challenges that occur where you might say, hey, but we're encrypted. We've got a valid cert. But what if you are spilling out some of that information because of something called DHE support? Now, there is something that's been proposed called the logjam attack. And currently, as far as we're aware, regular, say, cyber criminals do not have the computational power and effort and budget to be able to crack it. But when I found this on NSA servers a few years ago using Census, NSA was so concerned that their orphan servers had this particular vulnerability that between the time I reported it to the time that it was fixed, it was 8 hours. So these things are a very, very big concern for pharmaceutical companies, especially the ones that are producing our vaccines right now.
And I'm sure you've all been reading the news. In this particular presentation, we've been stressing the importance of monitoring your attack surface, but given the recent news and the importance of the vaccine to the world, we've seen, and as well as been reported, recent attacks focusing on that vaccine. And it's not just the producers, it's actually the supply chain and business partners. And there's an ever increasing need to be monitoring not only your own attack surface, but everybody that you do business with that you have to share information with, whether it be a regulatory body, supply chain third party. It's critical that everyone has good cybersecurity posture because the weakest link is the easy entry for an intruder. I myself would not be surprised if we saw organizations that have made huge investments in security start to utilize those investments like Census to assess security of third parties and assist with security guidance. I like to think, it's a lot like an MSSP. It's more than just that third-party view of your attack surface, but enforcing that in order to do business. Looking at third-party attack surface and advising where exposed risks exist is critical to not only the organization that has something proprietary like the vaccine data, but that whole supply chain is at risk. We're all at risk if things get modified in that data.
So in this changing security landscape, it's important to know if you have any exposed risks. And Census actually has an attack surface monitoring tool that can help you be aware of what your attack surface looks like. So the way this tool works is you would give it some CIDRs that belong to you or some domains that belong to you, and the tool would map out your entire attack surface. This asset discovery could help you find exposed risks that might be outside of your CIDRs. And on this slide, you can see a screenshot of a risks page that was taken from our ASM tool. So here you can see some risks that might be exposed on your attack surface, how severe they are, and how many hosts in your attack surface are affected by those risks. There's a row here for SMB, so you can see that this particular attack surface contains one host that is running exposed SMB. And you can see some risk categories that we have associated with that particular risk. So for SMB, we have that tagged with data loss, credential stuffing, malware and ransomware, and similarly for all the other risks in this table. So being able to see your risks in this ASM tool can help you identify and remediate these problems in a timely manner. If you're interested in learning more about the ASM tool, or if you'd like to see a customized demo of your own attack surface, you can email us at hello@censys.io.
Awesome. Okay, so we can talk a little bit about SMB. Chris, I know you had done some research on some of the specific attacks that have come through SMB. Do you want to talk a little bit about what we're seeing kind of from a global perspective there?
Yes. One of the problems with SMB is you've got two challenges. Certain versions are quite exploitable and known to be exploitable. And SMB can be on both Windows-based and Linux-based systems for interoperability. So just because you have Linux doesn't mean you're protected, which unfortunately many people think. And we've seen a lot of activity with SMB because it's easy and it's cheap to execute an attack. Now, we've also seen tools being spilled out, such as Eternal Blue, which is, quite frankly, a dead easy way to exploit SMB version 1. That was a tool that was supposedly leaked from the National Security Agency by these shadow brokers. And one of the other things that we've seen is quite devastating attacks being used with SMB. And I want to say you really should not be exposing your SMB. So WannaCry was a very major attack, and the most major attack on the screen is NotPetya. Now, last year before COVID, I had the opportunity to work with the German Marshall Fund. I'm one of their subject matter experts on cyber warfare. And we hosted an event in Washington, D.C. with ministers, ambassadors, experts, academics, and so forth. And we ran a scenario of what would happen if NotPetya or something like it occurred. And also explained what it was. Now, NotPetya is one of 4 known events that almost basically destroyed our modern world. It shut down the world's largest logistics shipper called Maersk from Denmark. And it threatened to halt all international shipping traffic, backup ports. Just imagine all of the stuff that many of us like to order from Amazon Prime or whatever other company would not be arriving and would just be backed up. Also think about food that would not be delivered and so forth. It was only because they had one computer in an African country that had not been exposed to NotPetya that they were able to rebuild. So the exposures on certain versions of SMB are very, very, very serious.
And we can talk too about our perspective of SMB versions. So as we are scanning the all of IPv4, we did want to kind of surface that SMB v1 is you can see here Microsoft really strongly encourages you not to use it. If we go back to that slide, which we did link, if you're in the healthcare industry, that actually I'll quick back up. There is a full kind of briefing here from AHA that talks a lot about SMB specific risks in healthcare. So we encourage you to use resources like that. But because a lot of those vulnerabilities leverage SMB v1, we did want to call out that our perspective of the internet is that 17.4% of all of the services that are running SMB right now are running v1, which is a really serious risk. So if you're a company right now and trying to say, hey, how can we make sure and tackle the low-hanging fruit that we talked about, this is a great place to start. If you find that you have SMB servers running in your environment, the very first thing you should do is make sure that it's not one of these vulnerable versions. And second thing is probably try to do an assessment to make sure that it's not exposed externally. And that segues into some recommendations as well. So we can pass over to Chris and talk about some recommendations as well.
Yeah, so it's very important because SMB is low-hanging fruit for a lot of automated malware, ransomware, cyber criminals. It's just an easy way in. And checking to see what your external exposure is at all times. If you do find some external exposure, disable that internet exposure as quickly as possible, especially if it's version 1. Then you also have to realize that if you have a whole bunch of internal exposure, especially of the more vulnerable versions, know what versions are exposed internally, because this is one of the ways that also ransomware, once it's inside through, say, a phishing attack or any other type of attack, can then get in and roll through your network, especially if it's not segmented. And then start a plan. If you're a CISO, a CSO, a BISO, or any other 3 or 4 letter acronym that deals with security, digital security within your organization, and look to phase out those versions and zero in on firstly version 1, and then look at starting to phase out version 2 as well.
This was great. We took a look at, a specific industry in healthcare. We took a look at specific protocol SMB, but your attack surface is much more than that. Continuously monitoring and managing that attack surface is more important now than ever before. Things are always changing. The world we live in right now is extremely dynamic. More infrastructure, more workloads moving to cloud environments subject to human error. Your workforce is evolving to locations both in and out of the office. One thing that hasn't changed, attackers continue to persist, making the need for outside of the firewall visibility great. So check on those locked doors before someone else does. For a demo, reach out to us at hello@censys.io or visit our website at www.censys.io.
Great, thank you. And thanks all who have been watching. We really appreciate it. Feel free to connect, as Alexis had said, and be on the lookout for additional webinars or content. And be sure to follow Chris on Twitter if you don't already. She's a fantastic Twitter follow. So thank you all.